and welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I hope you're having a lovely day. Today I'm going to be it's a video that I sort of like made up in my head. So I'm going the week before last on Instagram, I asked people if there was a book that reminded you of me, or a book that when you saw it you thought of me. And I got a lot of people come back to me, which I made a little survey of all the answers that people came back to me with, and I've sorted it into the sort of like the top 10 books that were mentioned. There was one clear winner, which I'm sure you'd probably all be able to guess what that was, but I'm going to work backwards through the books that people think of when they think of me, which is really, really nice, and when I read them and what I thought of them, and yeah, just their sort of relationship to me. So chance to see some books that are associated with me. Very much looking forward to it. Let's just get into it. The first, so like number 10, 9, 8, there was all 3 books received the same amount of votes for that. The first one is an audiobook I listened to many, many years ago, in the first year of me starting BookTube, and that is My Year of Living Danishly by Helen Russell. And this is a book where Helen moves to a rural part of Denmark. I've forgotten where it's called, but her husband gets a job working for Lego, and they move there. And it's sort of her coming to terms with the differences in life living in Denmark compared to living in the UK. On my first listen, I absolutely loved this book. I thought it was amazing. It had all the it appealed to me in all the sort of ways that a book of somebody moving from this country to another would, but on a re-listen, and I've listened to it a few times since, there's also a Christmas chapter in there, which I also normally listen to around Christmas. I feel like it is a very privileged book, and it is a book that, with the test of time, I feel like I've knocked it down to a 4 or even a 3-star book. So just goes to show, books that you sometimes love, and you think are the best thing ever, your relationship to them can change over the years. With the same amount of votes was the book My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. There is another Daphne du Maurier book appearing in this. Also another Daphne du Maurier got a few votes as well. The Scapegoat got a few votes as well, but that's not appearing in this haul. But this is I've only ever read this one once, and I must read it again. I might even revisit the audiobook of it, and I really, really love this. A lot of people said that they think of My Cousin Rachel of Daphne du Maurier when it comes to me, because I call my cousin Laura my cousin Laura. So yeah, so I really enjoyed this. This is about a young lad called Philip Ashley, sorry, I was trying to get my head around the names, who has a sort of very close relationship with his cousin, who's basically brought him up and stuff. Anyway, his cousin always goes abroad every year during the winter, so to sort of like for his health, and then whilst he's away one of these years, he dies, and while he's been away, he's married a woman called Rachel. So Rachel comes back, and Philip's relationship with Rachel is very sort of strange, in that he's very drawn to her, but he's very concerned that maybe she married Ambrose for his money and what's going to happen and things like that. And yeah, I've heard this described as like the original Gone Girl, which is a really good way of describing it, because there's lots of twists and turns, and there's lots of like, is it happening or is it happening? Is it in my head or is it not in the head? And yeah, I will definitely be revisiting this, because I've only read it the once and I need to revisit it again. The next one is Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters, and this is a book that, again, I've only read once. Sarah Waters is a new favourite author of mine. Last year I read The Paying Guest, which is one of my favourite books of last year, and Tipping the Velvet is one of my favourite books. I really, really enjoyed this. This follows, it starts in Whitstable, which is a place where I live, and near where I live, which I very much enjoy, and follows Nan's life on the stage and her relationships and things like that, and just, it's a real sort of like Dickensian jaunt, in that there's lots of like she moves somewhere and you hear about her life there, and then she moves on to the next place and you hear about her life there, and then maybe someone from the previous place will move to there. But it's just written amazingly. I really associate Sarah Waters with autumn, which is why this is one of the books that I'm going to be putting forward for my Patreon book club this month. I give my Patreons a chance to vote for what book they want to read in the month, and I'm going to put Sarah Waters books forward because it's coming into autumn and I love autumn. So yeah, so very much enjoyed this. Looking forward to revisiting that, if not for my Patreon book club, then at some point, because I really, really enjoyed it. So The next book was a book that I'd all but forgotten about, to be honest, and it is a book that's appeared in one of my favourite books of the year, but it's Eat Up by Ruby Tando, which is a non-fiction book. I mean, look at these end papers, it's amazing. It's a non-fiction book about Ruby's relationship with food, and she sort of lived a life of food, be it having eating disorders, but and then also loving food and also competing on like a massive national television show called The Great British Bake Off in the UK. It's also got sort of like really nicely written bits in here. The one that always comes to my forefront of my mind because I loved it so much is her ode to a cream egg. So cream eggs are something you get in the UK. I'm holding my fingers like that. They're a little chocolate egg with like some sort of like fondant in the middle, and you get them only around Easter time, so they're a bit of a special thing that happens in the UK, and there's an ode to a cream egg in there. I really enjoyed it. But I had completely forgotten about it, so for people to say that this book reminded them of me, I feel very excited about that because I'd forgotten that happened. The next one is one that I did think would turn up, and it's one of my favourite books of all times. It's Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is one of my favourite books of all time, as I mentioned, and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is one of my favourite authors of all time. I just think she's absolutely incredible. I love her fiction stuff, I love her non-fiction stuff, I love her fashion sense, I love her views on the world. I just think she's an amazing person. This book, I think, above all the others, is the favourite to me because it had characters that stay with me and I still think about even now. It follows Ifemelu and Abinze, who are teenagers who fall in love, and after Ifemelu gets a place studying in the US, Abinze has plans to follow her out there, but it doesn't happen, and he moves into undocumented life as an illegal immigrant in the UK, while she sort of moves from strength to strength in the US. She has a blog that's all about race and racism in the US, and yeah, the characters themselves just stayed with me so much, and I loved it. I've read it once and I've listened to the audiobook once, and I definitely think I'm due a reread of it because I just think it's an amazing, phenomenal book, and I would urge everyone to read it. It's one of my favourite books of all time. Amazing. The next one is one of my favourite books that I have read this year, so that is The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. This is a copy that I got from Simon. Simon was getting rid of some books in his house. I believe he's already got and this is a proof copy. It's a big old boy, isn't it? So John Boyne is the author of The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, but when I came to this book I did not know this. This is a book that follows the life of Cyril Avery, and you follow Cyril's life from when his mother falls pregnant with him and is banished from the local village because she's fallen pregnant outside of wedlock with a man's child who is an older man who's married, and then you follow her moving to Dublin, Cyril being born, and then from then on you follow Cyril's life through various countries he lives in with various partners and friends and trying to find his mother. And yeah, it's just amazing. There's really high highs and there's really low lows. I've cried, I laughed, I think it's amazing, and I have heard that they're making a film of it, which is really exciting. And I was just so pleased to be introduced to John Boyne's writing, because after I read this I went to the library and literally got out every single John Boyne book they had on the shelf, and since then I've read Ladder to the Sky, which is another of his books, which is also amazing, and he just writes so cleverly. I feel like there's sort of like nuggets which are dropped in really early that you'd never even think would come back to it. And in Ladder to the Sky, it's just a really cleverly written book. Yeah, so I adored this book, found it amazing, and really loved it. So that is one of my favourite books from this year. The next one that was mentioned was one that got quite a fair few votes as well. So we're getting into like the big voting side of things now, and that was Big Bones by Laura Dockrill, which is a book that I read last year. I was sent the proof of it before it came out. It came out in March last year, I believe, and I was sent the proof, and I read it for February last year. And this is a book about Bluebell, who is a body positive 16-year-old girl who knows she's got a big body. She's also known as Big Bones, but she doesn't care. She just wants to live her life and just enjoy life and things like that. And this was just such an eye-opener for me, because I would have done anything to have a role model like this when I was around Bluebell's age, like to be 16 and just to have this sort of role model was just amazing. I really like the way it's set out. It's set out in different chapters about food, so you're told her life through different sort of like stories about food. So for instance, toast, or leftover old shepherd's pie. Oh, I picked that up when I did it. And you hear a memory or something that's going on in her life at that time. I just feel like it's really cleverly done. I've heard Laura Dockrill talk about this book and I loved it then anyway, and I loved it even even more once I'd finished talking to her about once I'd heard her talk about it. And yeah, it's just one of my favourite books of all time. I feel it's really fun, really important, and just like, I wish I'd had it. I keep saying it, I wish I'd had it. So yeah. The next one is Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow. And all of these books that are now coming up, I sort of expected to hear about that people would expect me to be associated with these. So Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow. This is the first book in a series of books, which I believe is going to be called the Nevermore series. And you follow Morrigan Crow, who is a cursed child, who is cursed to die on her 13th birthday. However, on her 13th birthday, a chap called Jupiter North, who's this guy here in his little green suit with a big ginger beard and a big top hat, turns up and says that he will whisk her away to a place called Nevermore, where she's to compete to become part of a school and a part of a society called the Wondrous Society, and she has to take part in several tasks and things like that. What I loved about this particular book was that one of my favourite Harry Potter book is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, probably because of the tasks and also because of like other things that are going on in that book, but the tasks are just something that I really love, sort of like task number 1, thinking, oh, that was really good, but I've still got task number 2 and 3. So like hearing about tasks and things to take part in, I really loved in this. This is amazing because it has so much, like the author Jessica Townsend is very clear on how much she loves Halloween, how much she loves Christmas, and you can see that in her writing. And although it's a middle grade book for children, I can't not love this because it's got everything in it I love. The second book, when I read it, I didn't enjoy it as much, but on re-listening to it on audiobook, I really loved it. So the third book is out early next year. I've really got high hopes for this series, and yeah, it just made me feel wonderful, and I'm so pleased that so many people associate that with me. The next one is one that it's not a reading book. It's not even going to count as a non-fiction book, but I was not surprised that so many people had said that this reminded them of me, and that's The Green Roasting Tin, and that's because I bang on about it all the time. So I became a vegetarian 3 years ago. I think it will be 4 years in January, and I've always been a big cook. I've always loved cooking. Cooking's been one of my favourite things to do. It calms me down. I get so much joy out of eating food. I love cooking for myself. I love cooking for massive numbers of people. I just love cooking, like getting stuff prepared and things like that. And last year I was sent a copy of The Green Roasting Tin by Rakumi Iya, which is a book where you do lots of chopping and put things into one pan and then cook it in the oven. And her food combinations are just amazing. Like honestly, I've worked my way through this book, so quite often I've done like I've put a little folded the page over and written the date that I've cooked them, and I've cooked almost all of them. This is one of my favourite ones of all time. This is the broccoli quick cook quiche, and it's got a vegetarian section, it's got a vegan section. It is the best vegetarian cookbook I have ever got my hands on ever. Like I just think it's amazing. I've cooked almost everything from it. Everybody that I cook for it says it's amazing. The flavour combinations are fantastic. They're recipes that then stay in your head, so like I could pass these recipes on to people now because like I know how to make that quick cook quiche. I know how to make the escalavida that's on this front page, and yeah, I just think she's amazing. I've also got 2 of her. No, I haven't got the first one. The first one is just called the Roasting Tin, which has got meat and things in it. I haven't got that, but I've got the quick Roasting Tin, which I also love, but this is just my all-time favourite. And yeah, I did think that people might relate this to me because I'm always going on about it. I've had like, this just shows the sort of power of booktube, because I'm not a big booktuber, but I've had, I would say, over 150 people contact me to say they've bought this book because they've seen it on my channel. So it just goes to show like that people like recommendations, and it's impressive. It's impressive to me that so many people have contacted me to say that they've bought this book off the back. I think I've just seen my dad parking outside, but we'll carry on anyway. The next one is these last 2 are ones that I absolutely expected to see. So the first one that came in at number 2, which got 14% of the overall vote, was Harry Potter series. A lot of people just said Harry Potter, but a few people in particular said the Harry Potter illustrated edition. So this is the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone illustrated edition. They come out, oh look, I've just seen a little Halloween. They come out every year, except there wasn't one last year because Jim Kay, who does the illustrations, said that he wasn't ready. He didn't have Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which is my favourite Harry Potter book, ready. So we've had to wait an extra year for that. So that's out in October, I think. I'm very much looking forward to that. But yeah, Harry Potter is like a big part of my life. I love it so much. I've always loved it, and yeah, just I did suspect that that would be mentioned. So the last book, which got 25% of the vote, is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So many people who think of me when they see Rebecca, or the book Rebecca reminds them of me, and that's because I love it. It's one of my favourite books of all time. I mention it on the regular. I have Simon and Mercedes to owe thanks to for getting me into Daphne du Maurier, because she's one of my favourite authors. I think she writes extraordinarily well. Her description and everything is amazing. She's so atmospheric. The characters are fantastic. And I just feel like if I'd have been like alive when these books had first been coming out, I would have been absolutely thrilled to read about women, the way that she writes women. So yeah, Rebecca is about an unnamed main character. What do you call it? An unnamed protagonist? Is that what you call the main character? Who has recently married a chap called Maxim de Winter, whose ex-wife Rebecca is sort of very much at the forefront of the story when the unnamed new wife moves back, the new Mrs. de Winter moves back to Manderley. She is forever asked her opinions on things and told that this isn't what Rebecca would have done, or this is what Rebecca would have done, and she's very much like at the forefront of her life there. And then you sort of learn a bit about Rebecca, what her life was like before she died, and yeah, it's just amazing. It's just really it's literally, this could have been written like yesterday. It's so good. I've read it once and I've listened to the audiobook twice, no, 3 times now, and yeah, the audiobook is fantastic, the one that's available on Audible. But yeah, one of my favourite books of all time. So those are the books that remind you guys of me, or books that you think of when you think of me. I really enjoyed doing this, and yeah, let me know down below if there was a book that you thought of that wasn't mentioned. I got lots of books with just like 1 vote that I've definitely mentioned before, like This Is Going to Hurt, The Goldfinch, Fingersmith, which I've not read, The Trouble with Goats and Sheep, Turning the Tide on Plastic, Babysitter's Club, Disobedience, She Must Be Mad, which I've never read, Fox 8, which I've never read, An American Marriage, lots of like 1 voters. So yeah, really interesting. I was very interested to hear all the books that reminded you guys of me. And that's it for today's video. So I will see you all again soon for another BookTube video. Goodbye!